True Gangsters of Yesterday presents Outfit Stories Part 1, starring Anthony, the Hatch, Chiaramonte, Jackie the Lackey Cerrone, Willie the Beast Messino, Sam Carlisi, Albert Big Al Sarno, John No Nose DeFranzo, Chris Carty, and more. Also featuring Lieutenant of the Melrose Park crew Donald, the Wizard of Odds Angelini, and his crime partner Dominic Cortina. Louis the Mooch Eboli and Anthony Hatch Chiaramonte are both violent enforcers who both used brute force to strong-arm anyone who got in their way. But the Hatch would eventually meet his match. Also starring others under the umbrella of the Chicago outfit, as well as other crew members from different crews who associated with or had beef with the MP crew, from friends to foes. That's how the game goes. Anthony the Hatch Chiaramonte was a close associate of fellow street boss of the Melrose Park crew Sam Wings Carlisi, also known as Black Sam, a top figurehead in the Chicago outfit, but was chosen due to a lack of other choices for upper management picks. He also was known for blowing off sit-downs, doing things off the record. Even after a sit-down was had and things of that nature, he was not trusted by most of the others besides his own small Melrose Park crew. If some outfit members were not sick at that time, he would have been easily replaced and was over time. Even when he was in the Melrose Park crew, he tried his hardest to stay on top of operations in Elmwood Park, but with guys like Jack Cerrone, Joe Gagliano, John DeFranzo being in place, he was not needed and was starting to feel unwelcome by DeFranzo loyalists. DeFranzo would go on to be reputed boss of the outfit, and before that Jack was the reputed boss. Jack, while Johnny was his underboss, would go to prison. When he came out, he would return to his daily mob life, as now Johnny, his former underboss's new official underboss. Carlisi was also John's underboss, but for a very short time period. Carlisi was more of a front boss, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. The outfit had plenty of them, and despite what some may think, they were all powerful and legendary in their own way. And each crew was almost a mob of its own, for example, the Elmwood Park or the Chinatown or Carlisi's Melrose Park crew that he ran with the likes of Anthony Chiaramonte and Louis Eboli and Donald Angelini. Donald Angelini was Sam Carlisi's lieutenant of his Melrose Park crew. Donald is the crime partner of Dominic Cortina. These two men would be giving the Spilatro brothers gambling rackets, and would be Tony and Michael's replacement after Sam helped kill both of them along with others in a Bensonville basement. The order was handed down by mob boss Joey Doves Iappa, who DeFranzo shared his boss position with, in my opinion. It's very common. Look at Ricca, Accardo, and Iappa sharing that same boss position together. Iappa and Accardo would start to groom Jack Cerrone and John DeFranzo, and in return Jack would groom his enforcer Big Al Sarno, who was also the 3-minute gang crime partner of John DeFranzo, and the longtime best pal of both Joe Gagliano and Mike Swiatek, was like Sarno's real brother. He and Swiatek rode horses together. Messino and Swiatek were both close pals of Sarno and DeFranzo, and Willie was cool with Carlisi, but was loyal to his Elmwood Park crew, especially to Big Al Sarno, Jack Cerrone, and Joe Gags Gagliano. Willie Messino helped establish this crew from the ground up from its early days as the original Elmwood Park crew's Messino and Gags gang, also known as the West Side Loan Sharking crew, and were also referred to as leaders of the syndicate before it was more referred to as the outfit like we hear mostly today. John DeFranzo, reputed boss of the outfit, boss of the Elmwood Park crew and 3-minute gang, with former Gagliano enforcer Albert Big Al Sarno and 3-minute gang associate Chris Carty. All three men were in the Messino and Gags gang and part of Cerrone and Gagliano operations. Al was known as Joe Gagliano's and John DeFranzo's best friend. He was just as close with Mike Swiatek or closer. Big Al is the close pal of Jack Cerrone, Willie Messino, Marco D'Amico, the Spilatro brothers. The Spilatro brothers Tony and Michael, and the Lombardo brothers Joe, Rocky, and Andy Lombardo. He was not only close with all the top members in the outfit, but was close with the brothers of those members, as some brothers like Michael Spilatro would follow his brother Tony Spilatro into the life. Jimmy Boy Cazzo, Albert Big Al Sarno, Mike Swiatek, Joe Lombardo, John DeFranzo, Joe Gagliano, and the Spilatro brothers got along really well together. This is at a time when Swiatek and Sarno ran closely enforcing the rules of the outfit together as enforcers for the Elmwood Park and Grand Avenue crews. Sarno was more the muscle for the Elmwood Park crew, and Mike was the muscle for the Grand Avenue crew. The FBI seen Carlisi as a weak boss that was never the powerful powerhouse that Jack Cerrone was, or John DeFranco was. True gangsters in the street would go on to say Jack was 100 times more powerful than even Tony Accardo, and I would say the same about John DeFranco. Carlisi couldn't hold a candlestick to any of these. He was out of his league with guys like Jack and Johnny surpassing him in a major way. Carlisi died in prison after being sentenced to 13 years for racketeering in 1996. Born on December 15, 1921. Known as a ruthless mobster who came up on Chicago's Near West Side, Sam was actually born in Buffalo, New York, on the East Coast of the United States. He was not born in Chicago. He is also the brother of Buffalo crime family member Roy Carlisi. Sam would die in Dade County, Florida. Sam, through his brother Roy, had ties to cities like Utica and Rochester in northern PA. Carlisi owned a 2,500 square foot home in Tequesta Point. In western Florida, Rocky Infalis of the Cicero crew also had a home in Florida, and Iupa, Cerrone and Accardo vacationed at a summer home in Miami, Florida, and the feds bugged the vacation spot and listened in on Jack Cerrone's conversation about Whack in Action Jackson. John DeFranco was Jack Cerrone's underboss at one time. He would go to prison. Johnny would become boss around this time. One of his partners in crime would fill the void after Joe Gagliano died. Then John's best friend and Gagliano's mutual best friend would also get sick, leaving Johnny with no choice but to step up into the mob chieftain position. Originally, the FBI believed Albert, Big Al Sarno, former Messino and Gags gang muscle man, was the new boss, stating in the Tribune that they suspected him of being the new boss. Unfortunately for Sarno, it would be short-lived, but he came up together with Johnny in the Messino and Gags gang with each other, and both reported to Messino and Gagliano, the personal capos of Tony Accardo. Some say they were the real bosses all along. Agents struggled for years and years trying to find out who was actually boss at these times, and most of the time it was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. They didn't always have things right. Agents would take notice that Sarno moved closer to Accardo's Lieutenant Jack Cerrone and personal capo and bodyguard Willie Messino. With the trio of true gangsters now all living on 77th Avenue as the powerful Elmwood Park crew. The Cicero crew and Chinatown crew wasn't the only one with tough enforcers. The Elmwood Park and Grand Avenue crews were a force to be reckoned with, some members being a part of the first and second faction on the west and near west side. For example, Big Al Sarno and Joe Lombardo are members of both factions and have been arrested together in the past as the two true gangsters came up alongside each other in the EP's Messino Gags gang, with Willie Messino, Joe Gags Gagliano, John DeFranco, and others. The Grand Avenue crew, led by Joey the Clown Lombardo, is a direct extension of the Jack Cerrone's Elmwood Park crew. If Big Al Sarno never got sick, he would have 100% went on to become the new boss and replaced Joe Gags Gagliano, his best friend, as his successor. And that's what Joe Gags wanted, but he got real sick too, but didn't die. Now this is where Johnny steps into the limelight as Big Al steps down for a bit, being bound to a wheelchair, being took care of and looked out for by Michael and Tony Spilatro. Michael and Tony would stay with him and take care of him on a day-to-day basis till he recovered. Before leaving to Vegas, the two brothers were in Sarno's personal crew along with Frank Collada, someone Sarno could always trust. The two had a tight friendship. Also, Sarno was a part of both the Elmwood Park and Grand Avenue crew, which explains his tight friendships with these fellow gangsters, having bonds with Jack and Willie and Johnny from the EP crew, and hanging out with Tony and Michael Spilatro and Mike Swiatek of the Grand Avenue crew along with Joe the Clown. And his two brothers Andy and Rocky. Sarno also worked with Joe Ferriola at one point. Iappa and Sam Carlisi would work more closely with Ferriola. Originally, just like Sarno is the protege of Joe Gags Gagliano and Jack Cerrone. Carlisi was the protege of Joey Dove's Iappa, but here's where things get tricky and sticky. John DeFranzo and Jack Cerrone are also the proteges of Tony Accardo and Joey Iappa and Paul Ricca. Sarno was mainly connected to Jack Cerrone and John DeFranzo and Willie Messino, while Sam Carlisi did share Messino as a common friend. Carlisi had his own relationship with Joey Iappa, but Cerrone and DeFranzo were even closer with Iappa and Tony Accardo. No one was closer to Accardo and Iappa than Jack Cerrone and John DeFranzo and Willie Messino. Also at this point, Jack Cerrone was the biggest powerhouse of all time, surpassing Accardo in power by a long shot. Jack was now known as the motherfucking man, and then Johnny was equally powerful and successful, and they ran together along with Sarno and Messino. This was the untouchable Elmwood Park crew. The whole clique was all leaders of the original syndicate, and would go on to become reputed and undisputed bosses of the Chicago outfit. Jack also had close ties to Angelo, the Hook, Lapietra, who controlled the Chinatown crew as its feared street boss. Willie Messino would be the outfit's top advisor, top hitman in the EP crew, persona capo to Accardo, and bodyguard. Then came out of prison to advise king-time consigliere Marco D'Amico, and was personal underboss to Jack Cerrone when Jack was boss and underboss. Willie was acting underboss. Sometimes he was even acting boss in control of everyday operations. But to tell the truth, Willie never wanted that boss position. He was fine with being number 2 or 3 in upper management for decades. DeFranzo and Sarno would report to Messino and Cerrone while coming up together with Joe Lombardo, who also reported to Cerrone. Reputed capo of Elmwood Park and longtime reputed consigliere and front boss for John DeFranzo, along with Gus Alex and Peter DeFranzo of the Elmwood Park crew. Peter would eventually become boss, and at one time Gus was acting boss to keep the heat off John DeFranzo. Much like Jack Cerrone was John DeFranzo's boss, and he was Jack's underboss, Willie was Jack's personal underboss, and just like when Jack went to prison, he would get out to advise John DeFranzo and become his former underboss's turned now boss. New underboss fresh out of prison, Messino would do the same, being a long-time consigliere. He came out of prison to advise reputed consigliere Marco D'Amico. Peter DeFranzo, made man, brother, and heavyweight of the Elmwood Park crew, respected underboss and eventually crowned boss after his brother John goes into retirement, was always personal underboss, and then became official underboss, with Joe DeFranzo also being a part of the original Elmwood Park crew and still in the picture. With Carlisi now in prison, Joe would come out of hiding, as Carlisi had a contract out on him for a marijuana grow operation that Joe ran that got busted. Carlisi pulled a scumbag move and was looking for a reason to hurt Johnny while he was on top. And what a better way than to whack his brother? But Johnny would play dumb and just act like he didn't know where Joe was at or hiding. Soon after, Carlisi gets locked up and Joe doesn't have to hide anymore. Shortly after, the Elmwood Park crew would take the outfit by storm, leaving members of both the Melrose Park crew and the Oak Park dismantled and other crews in total disarray, while the Elmwood Park and Grand Avenue crew were now in takeover mode, and working well with the Cicero crew and Chinatown crew, with the Chicago Heights crew being pushing into those two factions more and more. For example, Angelo Lapietra would play a role in both the Chinatown crew and early days of the Cicero crew, along with Tony Accardo, with possibly the help of Spilatro bumping off Oak Park chieftain Sam Giancana, Mad Sam getting killed by his brother Mario and Tony Spilatro, and Chuck Nicoletti getting gunned down by Harry the Hook Aleman. The Oak Park crew was now over, and Phil Aldergio Giancana, former underboss turned short-lived boss and chieftain like Sarno, but unlike Sarno, his good buddy Phil Aldergio would not recover and die in the late 70s. Mad Sam DiStefano, mob chief of the Oak Park crew during the same time Joe Gags Gagliano made Big Al Sarno his protege, his successor, and new chieftain of Elmwood Park before the torch would be carried by Big Al Sarno's 3-minute gang partner in crime, John "No Nose" DeFranco. The lieutenant of the Melrose Park crew would cement his position in the outfit, replacing Tony Spilatro and taking over his rackets, but Donald associated with a lot of the West Side Gangsters and near West Side Gangsters. But after the death of Tony and Michael Spilatro, Dominic Cortina would rise through the ranks with him and Dominic becoming the perfect replacements. Johnny "No Nose" would pass away from complications with dementia at his home in River Grove. Shortly after his retirement and death, Peter DeFranco, his brother, would go on to lead the outfit till his death. Peter died from COVID-19, and so did his best friend and consigliere Marco D'Amico. Sarno died from cancer, but Marco, Peter, and Johnny went to the funeral all together to pay homage to the beloved EP enforcer Big Al Sarno. Other true gangsters would be in attendance that night. Johnny, having bad dementia at the time, forgot his beloved pal died after being told over and over Big Al had passed. Johnny would say, "Well, say hello for me. When you see him next, tell him Johnny said hey." Peter would have to tell him, "No, John, Big Al passed not too long ago." But before John's death, he was even sharp as can be with dementia, but this he had trouble with amongst other things, which would lead to his death, leading to more complications with the disease. Big Al Sarno and Chris Carty of the original Elmwood Park crew. Joe Lombardo, while on the run, would leave made man Mike Swiatek in charge of the Grand Avenue crew along with Jimmy Boy Cazzo. The Swiatek and Cazzo Compound. Part 2 coming soon. Rest in peace, Jimmy Boy, Mike Swiatek, Big Al Sarno, John and Peter DeFranco, Joe Lombardo, Marco D'Amico, Jack Cerrone, Willie the Beast Messino, and the Spilatro brothers. Rest in peace to one of the most beloved true gangsters of all time, made man and beloved pal Mike Swiatek. Mike was known for not backing down to anyone despite someone feeling protected by a button or an upper management position. Mike was one of the last guys you want coming after you. He was a feared enforcer, and for good reason, but Mike feared no man. Sarno also didn't give a shit who you knew or who you might be connected with. He would call you once and say that and hang up the random pay phone he called you from, letting you know he's coming for his money. He was legendary West Side loan shark and had Swiatek, Messino, Cerrone, John DeFranco, and the rest of the gang to back him, but he didn't need to call anyone. Big Al could handle his own. Same could be said for Messino. Jimmy Boy Cazzo and Mike Swiatek constantly stood by Albert Big Al Sarno. Swiatek and him were like real blood brothers, and Jimmy Boy was always on Sarno's side when it came to any beef. Jimmy Cazzo and Mike Swiatek without hesitation backed up Sarno. So did Messino, Cerrone, and John DeFranco. To be continued. Please don't be afraid to hit that link to donate and make a kind donation to the channel. It helps this channel keep growing. You can also like, comment, share, subscribe, and tell a friend, share on Facebook and Instagram, and spread the word about the mob history channel True Gangsters of Yesterday. Link to donate can always be found in my channel's bio section. Till next time on True Gangsters of Yesterday.